Mr. President, all of us are extremely concerned, and I mean all of us, Senator Risch and all the Republican colleagues and me and all of the Democratic colleagues about the suffering and famine that's upon the folks in Gaza. And today I'm here to offer a resolution for consideration on which 46 senators on our side agree. And although we've not had signatories on the Republican side, I know that my colleagues on the Republican side are very concerned about the devastating absence of food and medicine and baby formula for 2 million Palestinians that are living in Gaza. It's been 74 days, Mr. President, since aid trucks were allowed to transit into Gaza. That's a decision that the Israeli government has made under Prime Minister Netanyahu. And what does alarm me is that it's very clear under international law, it's very clear on prior actions that this United States Senate has taken, that in a conflict, as a tactic of war, starving the civilian population is illegal, impermissible, and just wrong, absolutely wrong. And as an indication of the suffering, this is a young child who died in her parents' arms, Janine Ishkafi. And that was due to no food, no baby formula to feed this young person. And the UN has released a report that indicates if food is not brought into Gaza, within the next 48 hours, 14,000 more infants will die. And they will die in the arms of their mother or father. So this question of should aid get in, obviously it should. It's not right for aid to be withheld as an instrument of war. And regrettably, that appears to have been a decision that has been made by the Israeli government. It's not right, it's not necessary, it's not helpful, and it is extraordinarily harmful to innocent children, to innocent mothers. So my hope is that this Senate would pass a resolution making it very clear about our concern about the well-being of innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and that food that those Palestinians in Gaza need is right on the other side of the border. It's there. All it needs is to be transported from where it is into Gaza and then distributed. You know, I want to just quote a Palestinian about how dire that situation is. The words of a Palestinian, let me quote, "Believe it or not," and this is, by the way, at a moment when bombs are still dropping, where people who've been relocated a dozen times are having to relocate again, where the 2 remaining hospitals in Han Yunis have been bombed, where there's no security whatsoever. This is what the Palestinian said that sums it up. Believe it or not, people no longer care about bombs, rockets, or even death. What consumes them now is food, how to find it, how to feed their children. It is impossible to describe how hard life has become. People walk around in a daze, dizzy from malnutrition and despair. People are confused, anxious, and exhausted. They are literally dying of hunger. At this point, they would accept anything just to survive. People are fainting in the streets. They look like skin and bones, pale and dizzy. If you saw them, you would break down and cry. That's the word of a Palestinian in Gaza. Mr. President, we've got to feed those people. The food is there. We all want those innocent people to survive and avoid famine. let us do every single thing we can to persuade the Israeli Netanyahu government to get that food in to people who desperately need it. Mr. President, at this point, I want to yield to my colleague, Senator Van Hollen from Maryland.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Senator from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for offering this resolution. And I just want to focus on the resolution itself for a moment, because you would think this is something that we could all agree on. I'm just reading the resolved clause here. Resolved that the Senate, Part 1, is gravely concerned with A, the humanitarian crisis and acute suffering of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and B, the suffering of the hostages and hostage families. So that's Section 1 of the resolved clause. As Senator Welch has said, I think we all acknowledge the terrible humanitarian disaster that Palestinian civilians are suffering under right now. President Trump just acknowledged it the other day. He said a lot of people are starving. Cindy McCain said, and I quote, "Families in Gaza are starving while the food they need is sitting at the border." 57 children have already died from malnutrition, and the reports are that 14,000 Palestinian children in Gaza are at imminent risk of death if they don't get more food. Now, just yesterday, after 78 days of a total siege and blockade on any food coming in to Gaza, a trickle of food began to get in, primarily because European countries began to say very loudly that what was happening was unacceptable, that it was a violation of international law. We're also hearing from the hostage families the urgency of putting an end to this conflict and resolving this to make sure their loved ones can come home. I was very glad to see Steve Witkoff be able to bring home Eden Alexander. Now we have to bring back the rest of the hostages, and the hostage families overwhelmingly have been calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government to end the conflict, end the suffering on all sides, and bring their loved ones home. Now I want to just read the second part of this resolution, because it does what I understand so many of the hostages' families have been saying that we should do. It calls on the White House, the Department of State, and other relevant United States government agencies to urgently use all available diplomatic tools to bring about the release of the hostages, an immediate cessation of the blockade on food and humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians, and a durable end to the conflict in Gaza. That's Part 1 and Part 2 of the resolve clause that I just read. And I want to thank Senator Welch, because he has written this in a way that you would think not a single senator could object to the words in this resolution. And so I do urge my colleagues to support it. Let's put an end to the suffering and starvation of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Let's get the hostages home, and let's work to end this conflict in a way that ensures no more October 7th and ensures security and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians alike. I yield back to the senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen.
Senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you again, Senator from Maryland. Mr. President, notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration, and the Senate now proceed to Senate Res. 224. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Action.
President.
Senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. Look, first of all, we have no disagreement with the suffering that's going on in Gaza. The problem we have here is, as we heard from both of these speakers, not one word was said as to whose fault this is. This is the fault of a group of people. And that group of people is Hamas. I heard them mention Israel several times. This is not Israel's fault. I heard them mention us, the United States. This is not our fault. I couldn't agree more with Senator Welch when he talks about the fact that we want an immediate ceasefire and for people to be fed there and things to get better there. It is so simple. It is so easy. It is totally in the hands of Hamas. If they release the hostages, they lay down their arms, and they surrender, not one more bullet will be fired, and there will be scads of trucks come into Gaza. That's how this ends. But can we end it? No. If we send trucks in, Senator, you know, you've seen the intelligence on this. When we send trucks of food in there, who eats? The soldiers eat. The Hamas soldiers eat. They starve the women and they starve the children. Not only do they starve them, they use them as human shields. And they set up their facilities, their military hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in all kinds of places that they then wring their hands and say, oh my gosh, we've been attacked. Look, this is despicable. This is horrible. This is criminal. It's beyond human understanding how human beings could treat other human beings the same way, especially when you're related to them as they are in Palestine. So I agree that this needs to stop. But the first thing that needs to be said is that this is the fault of Hamas, and it is not our fault. And it doesn't matter if we roll trucks in there tomorrow, that food would be taken, it would be stolen, it would be distributed by Hamas to their fighting soldiers, and the dying and the suffering of the women and children would continue. This thing is badly aimed. It does not in any way lay the fault where it belongs, and that is at the feet of Hamas. So based on all that, I share your objective. This gets us nowhere, and worse than that, it doesn't point out where the problem is. Madam President, I object.
Objections heard.
Madam President,
Senator from Vermont.
I want the senator from Idaho, the esteemed chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, to know that when it comes to condemning Hamas for what it did on October 7th, for what it's done to the Palestinians in Gaza on an ongoing basis, I join you in condemning Hamas. And this resolution, Madam President, does not get into the question of fault. It gets into the question of suffering. It gets into the question of suffering of innocent people who at times have been victimized by Hamas, but whose families are hungry, who are starving. And the point of this resolution is to say, let's help them avoid starvation by supporting the delivery of the food and the medicine and the baby formula that they need. This in no way is going to solve the conflict. That's a point the senator made, and he's got a point to be made. But if we do all we can to facilitate the delivery of aid, it means that we're doing all we can to ease the suffering of innocent families who have been victimized. My view, Madam President, is that we should do all we can to alleviate the suffering, especially for these infants, these children, these women, and peace-loving Palestinians who want nothing more than to live in peace in their neighborhood. I yield back.
Senator from Idaho.
Madam President, I want to respond to that. First of all, I commend the senator for his appreciation for the suffering that's going on there. It is horrible. It's despicable. You've seen the photos. You've seen the video. It's a horrible, horrible situation. One of the difficulties I have with this is he is correct. This resolution does not assign fault, nor does it talk about fault. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with this. If this is going to be resolved, fault must be identified. The conditions on the ground has to be identified. And how this is going to be resolved has to be identified, none of which is considered in here. It is simply a suggestion that simply taking food there is going to resolve this problem. And we have done that. We have food there. It's ready to go in. As I said, 3 things need to happen, and it's in the hands solely of Hamas, not in Israel, not in Netanyahu, not in our president, not in the people of the United States' hands. It's in the hands of Hamas. And that is, if they simply release the hostages, lay down their arms and surrender, it's over. The food flows in. There's not another bullet fired. That's all that has to happen. But what has to be recognized in this is how this is going to end. There's only one way this can end, and that is with the complete and total destruction of Hamas. This is very similar to what the United States of America and its allies did in the late 1930s. We decided that the Nazis were so bad they could not exist as a military force, as a political force, or as a cultural force, and we decided they needed to be eliminated. That's what Israel has decided it has to do to protect itself. That's what it's doing. But Hamas can stop this, and they can stop it in a minute. And they're not showing any signs of that. And so what's going to happen is this thing's going to fight. This fight is going to go on until the last Hamas falls. Thank you.